Oh my goodness, I am so dang excited because it is a I told you so, careful what you wish for kind of Saturday here at Occupy Democrats when it comes to breaking news, because Donald Trump just got a great taste of the medicine he's been trying to deliver to folks his entire life. And you are not going to want to miss this. I'm going to show you to in a few seconds. But this may go down in Trump's administration just after the 100-day mark as the flagship benchmark moment that people looked around and said, oh, that is how you handle Donald Trump, and that is the way you do it. Going to show it to you in a few seconds. To make sure you understand where we're at on this, take a look at this quick piece of clip from the Oval Office that just happened a little while ago. Take a look.
2 weeks ago, I signed an executive order banning men from playing in women's sports. Many Democrats are fighting me on that. I hope you continue, because you'll never win another race. And it's just crazy. The NCAA has complied immediately, by the way. That's good. But I understand Maine. Is Maine here, the governor of Maine?
Well, down here.
Are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it, because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply, because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Every state. Good. I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor, because I don't think you'll be in elected politics.
Do you remember that? That's Janet Mills, the governor from Maine, who said,
A few months ago, I stood in the White House, and when confronted by the President of the United States, I told him I'd see him in court.
and if you don't remember, way back in the day, the Jim Croce song Bad Bad Leroy Brown about the big bully tough guy who had this amazing reputation, so no one ever messed with him. But when someone finally did mess with him, guess what happened? Slim took him down. And in this breaking story, what did Janet Mills and the state of Maine just do to Donald Trump? And he has got to be pulling his teeth out right now. Check out this breaking story.
USDA agrees to not freeze Maine nutrition funds over transgender athletes. U.S. President Donald Trump's administration agreed on Friday to refrain from unilaterally cutting off Maine's access to federal funding used to feed school children, ending one of several legal fights stemming from the state's refusal to comply with his demands to ban transgender athletes from girls' sports teams. The U.S. Department of Agriculture settled.
I am so pleased to say that Aaron Fry's able representation of the state of Maine has resulted in a binding agreement by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins and all of her staff.
With the Democratic-led state, 3 weeks after a federal judge issued a temporary restraining order blocking it from cutting off federal funds used for nutrition programs. We are pleased that the lawsuit has now been resolved and that Maine will continue to receive funds as directed by Congress to feed children and vulnerable adults, Maine Attorney General Aaron Fry, a Democrat, said in a statement.
Well, I did see him in court, and we won.
USDA did not respond to a request for comment. The settlement does not affect the Trump administration's decision to sue Maine over allegations that it is violating Title IX, which prohibits sex-based discrimination in education programs, or the U.S. Department of Education's decision to launch an administrative proceeding to cut off all federal education funding for Maine's public schools. The U.S. Departments of Education and Justice claim that Maine is violating Title IX by allowing transgender athletes to participate in girls' and women's sports,
Whereby they agree to refrain from freezing, terminating, or otherwise interfering with the state of Maine's access to USDA funds allocated to any official or agency or department of the state of Maine based on alleged violations of Title IX.
The Education Department proceeding puts about $250 million Maine receives annually for school funding into jeopardy. The funding at issue with USDA was a smaller sum, about $3 million. Democratic Maine Governor Janet Mills clashed with the Republican president over the issue of transgender athletes during a White House event in February. At a February 21st meeting with governors, Trump threatened to withhold funds from Maine if it did not comply with an executive order he signed banning transgender athletes from playing girls' and women's sports. "We're going to follow the law, sir," Mills responded.
Well, I did see him in court, and we won.
USDA was the first agency to actually cut funding to Maine. But U.S. District Judge John Woodcock, on April 11th, concluded it likely did not comply with legal procedures when it froze funding and declared Maine was violating Title IX. Rather than litigate over whether a longer-term injunction should be issued, USDA agreed to not freeze or terminate the state's access to federal funds going forward without following all legally required procedures.
Just in case you're wondering, David just beat Goliath. And that's what happens still in the United States of America when you try to be a tyrant and run martial law and dismiss the concept of due process, what our Constitution stands for, and any form of democracy whatsoever. That's what you get. You get an agency that backs down off of some bolstering, blustering BS you're throwing around with the cameras on, because I got bad news for you, Donnie. You're going to find out more often than not that running the United States of America isn't being the star of The Apprentice, you punk. So keep this in mind, folks. Share this around. Make sure that you talk about this story while you enjoy your weekend. And as always, stay frosty.